Welcome to the SBI Podcast, offering CEOs, sales and marketing leaders ideas to make the number.
Hello, SBI Podcast subscribers. My name is Scott Brewer, and I'm a partner with SBI, a sales and marketing consulting firm dedicated to helping you make your number. With me is my co-host, Ryan Tognazzini, a principal with SBI. On this show, we discuss sales and marketing emerging best practices for viewers just like you, executives trying to grow your revenues. Togs, how are you doing today?
Awesome, Gru. How are you?
I'm doing great. Let's jump into it.
Yeah, so on today's show, we're going to discuss a topic that is getting a lot of publicity right now, big data. And more specifically, why using the right data to gain strategic alignment with your peers is mission critical. So while much is written about the topic of big data, many leaders, especially in the sales and marketing discipline, are still struggling to capture the right data and use it to make decisions about their strategies.
Why do you think that is?
I think in a lot of cases, companies capture too much internal data, and they don't spend enough time looking externally at market data and information.
Yeah, let's talk about that in a little more depth.
Yeah, so a lot of leaders get reports on KPIs about the health of their business, but they don't get and use external market data often enough. So examples of external market data would be things like win-loss interviews. So when you lose a customer or you lose a deal, you call on a customer and asking them why they selected you or why they didn't select you. Things like exit interviews from employees who've left. Or competitive intelligence from, that the field is gathering that lets you know what your competitors are up to.
Okay, yeah, I completely agree. I mean, market data keeps companies from falling in love with yesterday's ideas that are not aligned with customer needs. What other mistakes do you see leaders make when it comes to data, Ryan?
Yeah, I think tracking a lot of lagging metrics that represent what's happened in the past. So things like revenue or bookings or EBITDA. And, once these metrics start to suffer, a problem exists, but they're lagging indicators.
Those seem like the metrics that matter, though. I mean, what would you do? What's an alternative method to tracking indicators?
Yeah, so one point on lagging metrics is they're lagging, right? So by the time you get them, it's already happened. So it's too late. I mean, it's sort of like getting to the end of the game and you lost 5-3. I mean, the game's over. So some different metrics you might want to think about are what we would call leading and behavioral metrics. And these act as health indicators early on, so that you can make course corrections before the lagging indicators, start to really set in and your business is suffering.
Yeah, so you mentioned for lagging indicators a couple examples like revenue, EBITDA. Can you give a couple examples of behavioral or leading metrics?
Yeah, so behavioral might be, job adoption by a sales rep or a certification gets completed. And it starts to show that the team is doing the right things every day to work towards adopting a process or using something that you've developed. A leading indicator might be things like increasing number of leads or, pipeline phase advance rates to let you know that, you're accelerating deals faster through the funnel, or maybe that the funnel size is even growing, which is an indicator that, your bookings number is going to actually improve at the end of the quarter. So, these help show you the activities that ultimately will lead to results.
Okay. Yeah, now that you've framed it up, I get it. And I would agree with you. Most leaders are probably focused on those lagging indicators. So how does this tie into ensuring you're in strategic alignment with your peers?
Yeah, so as you start to look at things like behavioral and leading indicators, you can spot process breakdowns early. And you can have conversations with your peers about how to fix them across the different functions before it's too late.
Yeah, so if you hire somebody new, let's say, and they're in the onboarding process, you can look at things like training certifications passed, activity metrics, and you can spot whether that person is going to be successful in the role before they get to full ramp a year later, a year and a half later, and they have the lagging indicators to show. So that way, if somebody's failing, not even doing training certifications, they're not doing the required activity a month into the job, you can pull the plug.
Yeah. So, there are a lot of examples here, and I think that's a good one because ultimately you get an indicator of, whether or not somebody's going to be successful early in the job instead of waiting for them to fail, to your point. So, the concept of hire slow, fire fast, especially in the sales world, take your time to bring them on board, but if they're not assimilating into the organization quickly, they can start to cost you money, and the results don't transpire.
Yep. So one other example here, I was recently working with a marketing leader, and this marketing leader was producing a lot of leads, but sales wasn't following up on those leads, right? They were blowing them off. And we started looking into why that was the case. And what we found is the marketing leader was really focused on just throwing leads over to sales. Sales didn't understand what a good lead looked like. They didn't have the same definitions. They didn't know what the SLA was, or when they were supposed to follow up on those leads. So they were basically ignoring leads because they looked at all of them as low quality. And what this led to was a bunch of leads produced, nothing followed up on, and no feedback from sales to marketing. So as we got that into alignment and sales and marketing got a common definition for those leads, they started to measure things like top of the funnel, leading metrics, and sales started to look at how often do we need to follow up on these and what are our metrics. They got in alignment and they started to call all those leads, and they drove a lot more revenue because of that.
Yeah, and if you think about this, bringing it back to this concept of data and big data and using data to get alignment. Marketing's sitting here saying, hey, we're raising the victory flag, saying we've sent a bunch of leads over to sales and we're doing great. And, for every dollar we spend, we're generating X amount of dollars in pipeline for sales. And sales is blowing it off. So sales' metric and data is all focused on, how many deals are we closing, and, the leads coming from marketing are garbage. So, a perfect example of, how using data the wrong way sometimes can lead to a lot of internal friction.
Yeah. So the main point here is when the right data isn't used to make decisions, leaders revert back to what they did in the past or gut feel. This is problematic. It leads to conflict and confusion between functions and problems that could have been resolved earlier. They linger because you're focused on this ultimate output versus these leading indicators or health indicators that tell us what's going on.
Yep. All right, we're going to take a quick break and make our viewers aware of the SBI magazine. And when we come back, we'll discuss how big data allows you to allocate people, time, and money more effectively. Stay tuned.
Making your number is hard. Your problems are complex. Complex problems need complex solutions. Introducing the SBI magazine. Read in-depth stories written by award-winning journalists about how your peers have overcome their problems to make the numbers. When you need more than a tweet, social post, or blog article, turn to the SBI magazine. Go to salesbenchmarkindex.com to subscribe.
In this segment, we'll use SBI's revenue growth maturity model, which you can find in the How to Make Your Number in 2016 report, discuss the impact of using big data correctly. As you will see, there are 5 levels. Level 1 is chaos, and that's defined as having a corporate strategy, but no functional strategies. Level 2 is defined, which means you have a corporate strategy and you have functional strategies, but they're sitting on a shelf somewhere. They haven't been implemented. Level 3 is implemented. And this is where the functional strategies exist, and they've also been implemented throughout each department. Level 4 is managed, where you have functional strategies. They've been implemented within the department, but they've also been implemented and they're aligned across each function. There's alignment across the organization internally. And then level 5 is all of that, but you're also aligned to the market. So you're aligned internally and you're aligned to the market, and we call this predictable.
Yeah, and different criteria are looked at in each level to determine your maturity. And what we found in our research is that only 9% of organizations are in level 5, and they clearly outperform the rest. They have lower customer acquisition costs, they have lower customer lifetime value, and overall have a 4 times better chance of making the revenue objectives than companies who are in levels 1 through 4.
Yeah. So in a second here, we're gonna dig into how big data impacts your maturity level. But first, I want to make sure the audience understands what customer acquisition costs, customer lifetime value are. So customer acquisition cost is how much you spend to acquire a new customer. And then customer lifetime value is how much does that new customer spend with you over the entire extent of your relationship with them. So as Ryan mentioned, as you go up from level 1 to 2 to 3 to 4 to 5, with each step you see an increase in customer lifetime value and a decrease or an improvement in customer acquisition cost. So Ryan, let's talk about how big data fits into this model. And when you deal with an organization in chaos, which by the way, 51% of companies are, what's the state of their data?
Data? Companies in level 1, oftentimes they don't have data or it's a mess.
Yeah.
And so what happens is most of the data is from internal systems that maybe is self-reported, or it's you've got multiple disparate systems that's providing different pieces of information. Nobody can seem to agree on which piece of information is the right one. Almost all of the data indicators that get tracked are lagging, which we talked about in the first segment. Is by the time you get to that, it's too late. It differs depending on who's reporting it. So maybe marketing says we generated 100 leads for sales, and sales is like, we only got 50. The other 50 were garbage. And so really what ends up happening is nobody has faith in it, and people oftentimes will use it to prove success or to try and demonstrate that their function or that their group or their team is having success versus using it to make decisions around what's going on in the business.
Hold on a second. So people actually take data and they make it fit the story they want? I've never heard of that.
Yeah, right. Sure, you've never seen that. So, and so what ends up happening is that all decisions are made based on past experiences, and there's little confidence, whether it's expressed or unexpressed, of making decisions going forward. And so you get this cross-functional conflict, and a lot of unhealthy discussions that are happening in the business. And ultimately the CEO has to step in and make some of those decisions on how to figure it out, but is sort of flying blindly here. So, how about level 3 companies? So, let's talk about the difference between 1 and 3.
Yeah, so let me remind the audience. Level 1 is chaos, right? Where you might have a corporate strategy, but you don't have any functional strategies. Level 3, you have a corporate strategy. You have defined and documented functional strategies that are implemented through that function. So the data in this case is usually fairly clean, but it's still mainly internal, meaning self-generated data. It exists and reports are produced on a regular cadence. It's used to make decisions, so there's actually good enough data where you can make some decisions on it. Most of the decisions are made based on inward out data though, right? So you have moderate confidence in it because it can be spun and tweaked the way you want it to look. And there's still some cross-functional conflict because of the data, but it's more moderate than high. And usually it comes down to whoever spends the most time in the data or shouts the loudest gets listened to in this case. What about level 5, Ryan?
Yeah, so let's talk a little bit about level 5, which is predictable. And this is ultimately where you want to be. And so here you have market data, and it's captured and it's used to make strategic decisions. The key point here is that it's outward in. So the data that you're using is helping you make decisions, internally, but it's what's happening in the markets here. So, perhaps one market is growing more than another, or perhaps one segment of your market is purchasing products at a higher rate than another. So you're using that market data to then come back in and make decisions on how to proceed. The other things here is that data is accurate, and there's a link between data across functional departments. And so this is represented in what we call the hierarchy of objectives, and it's used to guide strategic alignment conversations. So we're all married up on what it is that we're measuring, and we're in the boat together, instead of coming to the meeting or coming to the discussion, with our own sort of bullets for the gun.
So Ryan, you mentioned the hierarchy of objectives. Let's make sure we define that for our audience. So the hierarchy of objectives is by function, so starting with the corporate strategy, what are the top objectives? And then each one, product, marketing, sales, and talent, all feed together, and there should be linkage between those objectives. So what you don't want here is marketing, to your point earlier, focused on how much, the brand, whereas we're launching a new product and we need leads for sales, right? There needs to be alignment throughout that hierarchy.
Got it. So final note on level 5 companies is that decisions end up getting made based on predictive data, which is mostly from the market, and the confidence in making those decisions is high. So even though cross-functional debates might take place, you're still using information and data objectively to ultimately make the right decision, and it's not necessarily a battle. Yeah. It's more about, hey, let's listen to what the data is telling us.
Yeah, a good example here. In a level 1 company, usually the debate is about the data. Is this the right data? You're in the weeds. In a level 5 company, the debate is about how to interpret the data to make the right decision. It's a healthy debate.
Yeah, tons of times you get into a meeting, somebody throws a number up on the board, and the whole meeting goes completely sideways because everyone, where'd you get that number? Or, how'd you come up with that? Or my data's giving me something different. So, yeah. You have an hour-long meeting, and 55 minutes of it is spent on, what is the right number? Yeah. And with 5 minutes left, the CEO finally just throws his hands up and says, hey, or actually, if it even gets that far, but throws his hands up and says, hey, guys, get your numbers straight and come back here and we'll have the conversation.
Yep. So it's no wonder that organizations with aligned strategies, which data plays a big part of, have a 96% chance of making their number. They use data to predict the future and remove as much chance as possible from the equation.
Yep, we're going to take a quick break, and when we return, we're going to discuss how to approach data like a predictable level 5 organization. Stay tuned, we'll be right back.
Each day, you receive hundreds of emails, tons of text messages, countless telephone calls, and sit in too many meetings. How do you find ideas to make the number with all this noise? The SBI blog filters all this nonsense for you and presents only first-rate ideas to make the number. Simplify your life. Subscribe to one blog and read the best content. Go to salesbenchmarkindex.com and subscribe today.
We have discussed how organizations low on the revenue growth maturity model have issues with data. Then we talked about how organizations at different levels on the revenue growth maturity model do things differently and the benefits of improving their data. Now we're going to discuss how best-in-class organizations develop a great data plan.
Yeah, so here, first thing you need to do is capture market data in order to make sure that you're developing the right strategies. So if you turn to page 38 of the How to Make Your Number in 2016 report, you'll see the 4 phases of market research you need to perform. And each is extremely important, and the depth required to do this correctly is going to take some time to develop. So maybe we should stop here and kind of go through those 4 phases and remind the audience of what they are.
Yeah, so the 4 phases of market research are market segmentation, account segmentation, buyer segmentation, and user segmentation. It's important to remember that each of these areas requires constant updating, and the sources of capture and refreshing data should be in place. Once you have done great market research and is built into your strategies, you need to develop the Stoplight Chart. The Stoplight Chart has the hierarchy of objectives by function that tie to the top of the corporate objectives. So the key here is that each business objective by function cascades, right? So there's the top corporate objectives, and then by function, those should all align. And the Stoplight Chart, as its name infers, is red, yellow, green, highlighting on each one of the objectives. So red means you're way off the objective, yellow means you're close, and green means you're nailing it.
Got it. Yeah, and then you want to define the behavioral leading and lagging indicators by function with the executive team. So it's not just lagging indicators in that Stoplight report.
To remind our audience what a behavioral leading and lagging indicator is.
Yep. So behavioral are activities or behaviors that somebody does, like the number of account plans that they've completed, or number of appointments that maybe a rep has generated, perhaps the number of pieces of content that somebody in marketing has generated. Leading would be something that shows early successes like pipeline growth or more marketing qualified leads, as an example. And then ultimately lagging indicators are revenue, bookings, EBITDA, et cetera.
Thanks, Ryan. Once you've identified what to track, assign clear ownership of who is going to be collecting, cleansing, and distributing the data, and who the audience is. Also ensure that there's a clear system that captures the data and is consistent across each function, as we discussed earlier, which is super important. And there shouldn't be multiple sources of truth depending on the audience. There should be one source of truth for data.
Yeah. Yeah, the difficult part about data planning is the cycle never ends. So if you take your eye off the ball, the next thing you know, your data is dirty or it's old and it loses credibility. So make sure as you're thinking about this, you've got a system to to constantly make sure that the data is updated, and you've got the tools available to help you do that.
Yep. While data planning never ends, this show does. And unfortunately, we're at the end of our time. So thanks for joining Ryan and me. We hope you've enjoyed watching us and picked up a few insights along the way. If you enjoyed this show, I suggest you subscribe to SBI TV at salesbenchmarkindex.com/TV, or you can find us at our SBI YouTube channel. We have some outstanding guests confirmed for the future episodes that you will not want to miss. Until then, we wish you the best of luck in trying to make your number. So long.
This has been the SBI Podcast. For more information on SBI services, case studies, the SBI team and how we work, or to subscribe to our other offerings, please visit us at salesbenchmarkindex.com.